Okay, I'm going to show you how to use the events all node, the Home Assistant events all node in NodeRED. And I'm sure this is not comprehensive, but I'll do my best. I use it for a few different things. Most of the time it's to capture a specific type of event with specific criteria in order to trigger some sort of automation. And one of those automations that I do is playing random or preset sounds for various events in the house on various media devices or various speaker zones depending upon certain conditions, time of day, or Boolean switches or selections or whatever. Either way, the events all node is a pretty powerful node. It also can get you in trouble, and I'll show you how. Let's go up here, filter by events, and you'll get the events all node here. Drag that in, create a debug node because you want to see what's going to happen here. Set the debug node to complete message object so you can see what's coming through. Connect the two. And now what you need is from the events home page or the events page on the Home Assistant website, choose one of the types of events because you need to tell that node, this events all node needs a specific event type to listen to. If you leave it empty, you might end up with just a stream of endless garbage, and it could clog things up and maybe cause problems for you. So because I'm listening for state changes, right here, state changed, I'm going to enter state changed into the events node, events all node, right here, event type, state changed. Now, state changed is still pretty broad. There's a lot of devices in my system that are constantly changing their state. So I'll show you what happens if I deploy this and then look at the debug window. It's going to show me a pretty quick stream of information is going to come blasting through of all the items, all the things in my system that are changing state. And I want to make that stop. So I'm going to disconnect this and I'm going to click deploy again. Now it's going to stop. But what I have now is a sampling of what the data looks like when a state is changed. And with that, I can start filtering out the information that I actually need. So I can look at this, expand this, and look at the payload. And I can see that the event type was state changed. Perfect. The entity that changed is right here. Some other, when it happened. Some of the context can matter, like the user that caused it to happen is in here. If it was automatic, it was done, if it wasn't user initiated, this will be null, just like it is. But this is one way you can listen to all state changes that are caused by a specific user. If you go to what you're going to see here in the state change node is this event data section right here. This is where you put in a little bit of JSON brackets to filter out what you want. And that event data starts here when you look at the object payload event. Everything under event is what you would put in the event data to filter out. So, for example, if I wanted to filter out all state changes by this particular sensor, what I could do is I could go into this state changed. I can open this up and I could type in entity ID, right? Entity ID. It's under event. We're assuming that we're already under event, so we don't need to address event. We don't need to say payload.event. We just go straight into entity ID, colon, and then the name of the entity ID. And that's it. So when I deploy this, I'm only going to get events that match this entity ID right here. If I wanted to say, even drill down even further and say, I want only these this entity, but I want the old state to be a specific amount. Let's say I want a state class measurement, friendly. No, I don't need to measure by any of those. But let's say I wanted the old state to be, well, it's 16.8. So I could come in here and I would do, I've got entity already, so I'm going to do comma, right? And old state and new state, I'll make that smaller again. Old state and new state are at the same indentation level as entity ID. So they'll be direct, it would be directly under this. We do a comma, and then we do old state, if that's what I'm searching, if I'm filtering by. And then I might want to do state. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to put in 16.8. Okay, now when I deploy this, let's clear that out. As soon as this starts running, it's only going to allow, there we go, event old state 16.8. Here's another one, event payload event old state 16.8. So every time this entity is updated and it matches, it will come through. But you can see it, unlike before, it's not a constant stream of hundreds of messages. It's just this one. And it seems to update quite a bit. So let's see if there's anything else. We'll go ahead and stop this. See if there's anything else in the state change that's unique. Because we've said, hey, only find state changes that are from the power setting on the monoprice amplifier that match the old state of 16.8. Let's see, are the context IDs different in each one? Let's see. Context ID. Yeah, those are different. No, it's the same. Yeah, it's different. I'm never going to search by that, though. Let me show you the real practical example of what I've got here. Let's jump to a node that I created before. Audio-enabled entities. In my configuration for a specific entity, let's say for this one, we're looking at a state that is changed on, let's see, what did I have here? Any state change where the new state attributes contain audio-enabled true and audio-random false will show up. Now, what are those things? Well, I can show you here in my developer tools. Let's go over here, and I'll search for states. I can show you one. It's called the grandfather clock. It's a sensor. Let's do sensor grandfather clock. This sensor I created in the configuration, and it's a template sensor, and the template tells it to basically tell me what the current minute is. It's 10:41, so I've got a 41 in here, and this is used in my grandfather clock routine to identify minutes 0, 15, 30, and 45. But that's not the important part. The important part here is under the attributes. I've manually added audio-enabled true and audio-random false. The grandfather clock doesn't play random sounds right now. It only plays a specific sound 4 times an hour, and then at the top of the hour it plays a chime. And that chime is represented by a single audio file for each hour, 1 through 12. And so this was done inside of the config folder using YAML. So in order to actually mark this entity as audio enabled, I had to come into, I use Studio Code Server. Let's see if we can get into here without revealing anything. Under custom integrations, customize YAML. I've got, let's see if I can find grandfather. Yep, right here. Grandfather clock. Sensor.grandfather clock. Audio enabled true and audio random false. So when I restart the system after creating this or adding this, it adds those two attributes to that entity. Then in NodeRED, when that entity, when those values end up being embedded at this level here, new state attributes, audio enabled true and audio random false. So that is a way for me to create a flag on an entity that I can then filter through NodeRED using the events all node. And so for this particular one, I can show you in Studio Code Server under sensors that I created a sensor. It's a template sensor, and the name is grandfather clock. So it's going to end up being called sensor.grandfather_clock. And the state is always going to be the value of now in the form of this single digit number. And so that's how I get that value. So as a result, I get a state change every minute on the minute. And that state change is watched by this node. And I can show you here what happens when we have it run through. When 10:45, and strangely enough, 10:45 is coming along, and the alarm clock or the grandfather clock should chime too, because 10:45 is a number that I allow to pass through the other automation that I have. And 10:45 hits. It shows that this event happened at 10:45. And I can see that the data inside the payload is the event type, state changed, exactly the sensor I wanted. Now I didn't filter out by sensor because I don't necessarily want to have a single events all node for a single entity. That's why you can filter them out by using other attributes, custom attributes. So if I wanted to do all sensors, for instance, I mean, I could probably just come in here and remove these and add some other criteria. But for this instance, the event, what was I asking for here? I'm asking for new state to be audio enabled true and audio random is false. So we can look at new state and we could see what's under there, and new state attributes, audio enabled true and audio enabled false. So it allows it to pass because those match what I've told it to match in the node. From here, you can take all of this data, you can do stuff with this, whatever you want to do with it. And I can show you in this particular node, I've added quite a few things because I need them in order to do what's next, which is down here. And I'm not going to go over this right now. This will be a separate video. But this routine right here, this automation is designed to create a folder structure underneath in one of your shared folders on your network attached storage or in your configuration for this entity, so that you have a place to put the audio files so that they can play. And I'll go through that in depth in another video if you guys would like to see that. Let me know. If that's the case, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and I can put that video together. It's going to take some time because there's quite a bit of stuff that I needed to do. But back to this one, under the audio enabled entities, typically, let's go to a fresh events all node. In a brand new events all node, what you can expect to be output is the payload, which is the event data, which is this payload with the event data, and a message topic of the output data event type. Now, where is that? Do I see that here? New state, message ID, message topic. I don't see that here because I cleared it out, and the only thing I'm seeing are from my node, and I think I deleted that. Yeah, I don't have that in my node. So that's not a necessary, this is not necessary, it's just default. But those are the two things that by default the node puts out. Now, you can put out all kinds of stuff, and it's valuable to do so because you can use that throughout your entire flow. And in this case, some of the things that I put out was I put message entity. I want that to be a message. That's right here. Then I can do a domain folder because I need a folder for the domain sensor. And then I need a subfolder under that for the entity. It's the grandfather clock. I also have a Boolean switch in my front end where I can switch this between MP3 mode or text-to-speech mode, depending on, I don't know, time of day or mood, whatever I feel like. I can have it either play a sound or I can have it talk and say the time. What else do I have in here? Audio enabled. I add that here. Can't remember why, but it's there. And audio random false. And the new state of 47. I think I do that just because it's easier to look at a message and see the data and the information that you're using in your flow right here, instead of having to drill down every time to look at your messages and find that data. So for instance here, message entity, which is here, becomes message.payload.entityId. So I'm grabbing message.payload.entityId right here, and I'm moving it to just simply entity. And I'm doing the same thing with message domain folder, but message domain folder, and these are all using the J expression. When I come into this, there's a little bit of language learning you have to do here, and it takes a little bit of time to figure out, but there's references all over the internet. This particular JSON ATA, JSON ATA, you take message.payload.event.newState.entityId. Now I'll run through that. It's message. That's this. This whole thing is the message. Message.payload. Okay. .payload. .event. Find event. Then new state. Open this up. We find new state. Then entity ID. Sensor.grandfather clock. I take that and I take everything before the dot because I want to extract just sensor. And because domains might have different lengths of letters, not everything's going to be 6 characters. Sensor, device tracker, switch, they're all different. I just want all of the characters in front of the separator, which is the dot. So I use the substring before, take all of these strings before this dot, and that's what you define as your what is it? Delimiter, demarcation point, your splitter. So you're saying, give me everything before the period, and the result ends up being, as you can see, domain folder sensor. And then the same thing happens here for the entity folder. I need to create a string of characters to represent what the entity folder is going to be called. And so I do the same thing here, but it's substring after the dot, right? Pointing to the same, the same path. And I suppose I could use, because this has already been created, I could use the entity. Maybe it hasn't been created. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be able to use that yet. I could use payload.entityId. So it could just be payload.entityId here rather than event.newState.entityId. I'm not sure why I did that, but I did. Another thing I do is pull the entity mode, which is MP3. Entity mode is, I'll show you here. Entity mode is set by, there's this fancy feature that you can use with the expression editor where you do entities, and then you do input select and dot and substring after. You can grab the data of a specific entity, its state. You can grab its state or attributes or whatnot straight out of Home Assistant by using this. So I've said entities, and I've kind of pieced together a string here. Input select and period, and now I do substring after and I'm pulling the entity ID. So I have a corresponding input select dot grandfather clock underscore mode. So for every entity where I want to give text to speech or an MP3 mode, I have an input select that I've created using the Home Assistant helper feature to create a select box or a dropdown where I can choose MP3 or TTS, but it's named in parallel with the sensor that runs this automation. So sensor.grandfatherClock and input select.grandfatherClock underscore mode. And that's just so I can keep it all organized, and I can search for it quickly by grandfather clock. And I can use this to reference it instead of typing it out, because if I do change it, I'd be able to only change a few things and have all of this node programming still work. What else do I have in here? I have entity mode, audio enabled true, audio random, whatever it is. And then the new state is 46. That's the minute we're on. And as you can see, as time is passing on this video, we're down to 54. And so that puts out a number 54, and I use that to, with a switch node later, or a function node, to identify whether or not this is a minute that I want to have make a sound or not. And it's not, because it's a grandfather clock. I want it to hit on the 0 minute, or the top of the hour, the quarter hour, 15-minute mark, half hour, 30-minute mark, and 3/4, 45-minute mark. So nothing's going to happen in the other automation until this reaches 0. And we already passed the 45, so we missed that. But this comes from message.payload.event.newstate.state. So message.payload.event.newstate.state, right there, 54. And I don't know there's a whole lot more to say about the events all node, but that is how I've figured out how to use it. You've got a way to filter which events come through, and then you have a way to formulate a message, a more comprehensive message that passes on to the next node. And the reason you do this is because you don't necessarily want to have a change node, because a change node would do all these things too. I could run this into a change node, and I could create all of these outputs. Basically, I could come into the change node, and I could recreate all that, set message.payload.whatever to, whatever value I want. And basically, I've just added another piece of spaghetti to my flow. The downside is that you kind of have to remember that you've done this, right? Otherwise, you might lose track of where things are coming from. So if you need the visual of having this in the middle of your flow, so you know that it's there and it's happening, and then you could give it a name, add things, then that's kind of your note to what's going on. And you could even comment right here and maybe have some notes here. I believe you can even go into your, you can write notes and descriptions here in the node itself. But I don't do that anymore because I want less stuff on my screen, and I can show you. So that's basically the events all node and how you can use it. You can get really creative with it, and you can get really crazy with it too. NodeRED is pretty awesome. My automation for playing sounds throughout the house on specific speakers and on specific media players is, this used to be spaghetti all over the page, and there's still some problems with it and how it's organized, but this is the entire flow. And there's some stragglers out here too. But I use this flow, which starts right here with the state change events all node, to build the automation that helps my house make noises. And I can do a video on this eventually. This is really complicated. It took me a long time to figure this one out. But if any of this helped you and gave you a little bit of clarity, that's the whole point of me making this video. I hope it did, because It took me a long time to figure some of this stuff out, and a lot of times it's scary to get into NodeRED and it's a little confusing. But when you get down to it, it's events, watching events or watching triggered events, and then sending that information down a line of like a line of tasks where you can manipulate it and tell it what to do and have it do things for you, and be very creative with your programming, and without very much programming. A lot of it is just understanding folder structures, getting a few little pieces of JSON language going, and I'm by no means a programmer or an expert, and everything I've learned here I've done by trial and error. So if this was at all helpful, subscribe up, and I'll keep making more of these slowly but surely. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.